Your ideas are mediocre at best. Brandon Whitmore laughed, his voice echoing through the empty dining room I had spent 8 months designing. We're going in a different direction. Clean out your office by tonight. I stood there, stunned, watching him dismiss everything I had poured my heart into with a casual wave of his hand. The restaurant was 2 weeks away from its grand opening, and he was firing me. The person who had created every single detail from the concept to the menu to the marketing strategy. My name is Jasmine O'Connell, and I'm 39 years old. For the past 15 years, I've been working in the hospitality industry, climbing my way from server to restaurant consultant to executive chef. 6 months ago, I thought I had finally landed my dream job when Brandon hired me to create the signature restaurant for his new boutique hotel, the Sterling Rose, in downtown Portland, Oregon. He had promised me creative freedom, a partnership opportunity, and my name on the door. Instead, I was staring at the ruins of my professional reputation. But Brandon, the opening is in 2 weeks, I managed to say, my voice barely steady. The staff is trained on my systems, the suppliers are lined up, the marketing campaigns are already running with my concept. He shrugged, not even bothering to look at me as he scrolled through his phone. My new head chef will figure it out. Someone with real credentials this time, not just small-town experience. The condescension in his voice made my stomach turn. I had spent months developing the farm-to-table concept that would showcase local Oregon ingredients, designed the entire interior to complement the seasonal menu, and trained a staff of 20 people on my vision for elevated comfort food. The irony wasn't lost on me that everything he was keeping, my recipes, my design, my staff training, he was calling mediocre, while simultaneously planning to use it all. What about my contract? I asked, knowing the answer would devastate me. Check section 12. We can terminate for creative differences with 30 days' notice. You'll get your final paycheck, but that's it. His smirk told me he had planned this all along, probably waiting until I had done all the hard work before bringing in someone he deemed more prestigious. As I looked around the dining room one last time, taking in the warm wood accents I had chosen, the custom light fixtures that had taken weeks to source, and the open kitchen design that would showcase the culinary theater I had envisioned, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about losing a job. It was about having my creative soul stolen and repackaged under someone else's name. But as I walked toward my office to pack my things, I noticed something that made me pause. The vacant storefront directly across the street had a for lease sign in the window, and suddenly, an idea began to form. The next morning I sat in my small apartment kitchen, surrounded by notebooks filled with recipe tests, design sketches, and business plans that now felt like artifacts from a lost civilization. Everything I had created for the Sterling Rose was legally Brandon's property, but the passion and knowledge behind those creations were still mine. I had grown up in a family of restaurateurs. My grandmother ran a small Irish pub in Boston, and my mother had owned a catering company that she built from nothing into a thriving business before selling it to retire. They had taught me that success in this industry wasn't just about food. It was about creating an experience that made people feel like they belonged somewhere special. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Kelly, who worked as a food critic for Portland Monthly. Heard about Sterling Rose? That's brutal. Want to grab coffee and plot revenge? Her offer made me smile for the first time in 24 hours. Kelly had been covering the Portland food scene for 8 years, and she understood the politics and personalities that could make or break a restaurant. More importantly, she knew my work and had been excited about the Sterling Rose project since I first told her about it. Over coffee at our usual spot, I found myself confessing something I hadn't even admitted to myself yet. I keep thinking about that empty space across the street from the hotel, I said, stirring my latte absently. It's the perfect size, and the rent would be a fraction of what Brandon's paying for his space. Kelly raised an eyebrow. Are you thinking what I think you're thinking? Maybe, I said, feeling a familiar excitement building in my chest. I have enough savings to cover startup costs for a small operation. Nothing fancy, Just good food and the kind of atmosphere that actually makes people want to stay longer than their Instagram photo session. You'd be going head-to-head with your former employer, Kelly pointed out, though her tone suggested she thought this was more of an opportunity than a problem. He stole my concept and fired me 2 weeks before opening. I think I can handle a little competition. As I said the words, I realized I meant them. Brandon had underestimated me, assuming that without his hotel's marketing budget and prestige location, I couldn't possibly succeed. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. He might own my designs and recipes now, but he had never understood what made them special in the first place. He saw trendy ingredients and Instagram-worthy plating, but he missed the heart of what I had been trying to create. A place where food brought people together, where every dish told a story about the community and the land that produced it. By the time I left that coffee shop, I wasn't just planning revenge. I was planning a revolution. 3 days later, I was standing in the empty storefront across from the Sterling Rose, calculating square footage and envisioning possibilities. The space had been a vintage clothing store, and the exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors gave it the kind of authentic character that Brandon's polished hotel restaurant could never replicate. The previous tenant had left behind some fixtures that could be repurposed, and the kitchen space, while smaller than what I was used to, was perfectly adequate for the intimate dining experience I was beginning to envision. The landlord, an older woman named Patricia Chen, seemed skeptical when I explained my concept for a pop-up restaurant. "You want to compete with the fancy hotel across the street?" she asked, glancing through the window at the Sterling Rose's imposing facade. "I want to offer something they can't," I replied. And then I told her about my vision for what I was already calling Bloom, a neighborhood restaurant that would change its menu completely every 6 weeks, showcasing different aspects of Oregon's agricultural seasons. Unlike the static luxury concept Brandon was implementing with my stolen designs, Bloom would be dynamic, personal, and genuinely connected to the community. Patricia's expression changed as I talked about partnering with local farms, featuring guest chefs from food trucks and home kitchens, and creating an atmosphere where families could afford to celebrate special occasions without feeling intimidated by pretentious service. "How long would you need the space?" she asked. "Initially, just 3 months," I said. "If it works, we can discuss a longer lease." The truth was, I was betting everything on those 3 months. My savings would cover rent, basic equipment, and ingredients for a soft opening, but there would be no safety net. If Bloom failed, my career in Portland would essentially be over. But as I looked across the street at workers hanging the Sterling Rose's signs, I felt a determination I hadn't experienced since my grandmother first taught me to make her famous shepherd's pie when I was 12 years old. That afternoon, I called 3 people. My former sous chef Carlos, who had quit Sterling Rose in solidarity when he learned about my firing. My friend Margaret, who ran a small marketing agency focused on local businesses. And surprisingly, the food blogger who had been documenting Portland's restaurant scene and had already reached out to ask about my sudden departure from the hotel project. Each conversation went better than I had hoped. Carlos was eager to join me and had already been fielding offers from other restaurants who wanted to poach Sterling Rose's trained staff. Margaret offered to handle my marketing in exchange for equity in whatever venture I was planning. And the blogger, intrigued by the David versus Goliath narrative, wanted to document the entire process from concept to opening. By evening, I had signed a 3-month lease and put down a deposit. The Sterling Rose was set to open in 11 days. I was giving myself 10 days to create something that would make Brandon Whitmore regret ever crossing me. The first week of building Bloom was a blur of 14-hour days and pure adrenaline. While Brandon across the street dealt with the chaos of final preparations for his grand opening, I was transforming my empty space into something that felt like a cross between a farmhouse kitchen and an art gallery. Carlos and I had recruited 4 other Sterling Rose employees who were frustrated with Brandon's management style, and together we created an efficient operation that could serve 40 covers with the kind of attention to detail that most Portland restaurants struggled to achieve even with twice the staff. Margaret worked her magic on social media, building anticipation without revealing too much about our concept. She positioned Bloom as Portland's most exciting culinary secret, using hashtags like farm toe glass and seasonal story that hinted at our philosophy without giving away specifics. Meanwhile, I reached out to every farmer, forager, and artisan food producer I had built relationships with over the past year. Most of them were furious about how Brandon had treated me, and several offered to provide ingredients at cost for our opening month. The Sterling Rose's grand opening was scheduled for Thursday night, with a private party for investors and media followed by public service starting Friday. I had originally planned to open Bloom the following week, but as I watched the frantic activity across the street through our front windows, I realized I had been thinking too small. If I really wanted to make a statement, I needed to open the same night as Brandon's grand opening. "Are you insane?" Kelly asked when I called her Tuesday evening with my revised timeline. "You're talking about going from empty space to full service in 48 hours. Technically 60 hours, I corrected, checking my watch. And we're not doing full service. We're doing something better." I had been refining the concept all week, and what had started as a simple pop-up restaurant had evolved into something more ambitious. Instead of trying to compete with Sterling Rose's polished luxury, Bloom would offer the one thing Brandon's operation couldn't: authenticity and innovation happening in real time. The next morning, I called every food critic, blogger, and influencer in Portland with a simple invitation. Come watch us cook. Instead of hiding our preparation in a closed kitchen, I was opening our doors Wednesday evening for what I called a preview dinner. Guests could watch us prepare their meals, ask questions about ingredients and techniques, and essentially become part of the creative process. It was the kind of intimate, educational experience that Brandon's formal dining room could never provide. Carlos was skeptical about the timeline, but excited about the concept. "It's either going to be brilliant or a complete disaster," he said, as we tested our final menu Tuesday night. "Probably both," I admitted, plating a dish of roasted beets with herbed goat cheese and candied walnuts that showcased 3 different local producers. "But at least it will be memorable." By Wednesday afternoon, we had taken reservations for 30 people for our preview dinner, and Margaret's social media campaign had generated enough buzz that Portland Monthly had decided to send a photographer. The contrast with what was happening across the street couldn't have been more stark. While Sterling Rose's staff ran around in formal uniforms dealing with last-minute crisis management, our team was calmly prepping ingredients and setting up our open kitchen space where guests would be able to see every step of their meal preparation. The real test came when I spotted Brandon through our window, standing on the sidewalk with his phone pressed to his ear, clearly agitated about something. He looked over at our space, noticed the activity, and I saw his expression change from confusion to recognition to something that looked like panic. 20 minutes later, his assistant walked into Bloom with a takeout coffee and pretended to browse while obviously scoping out our setup. I smiled and offered her a sample of our signature appetizer. "Please tell Mr. Whitmore we wish him luck with his opening," I said sweetly. The message was clear. I wasn't hiding, and I wasn't intimidated. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made Portland feel magical. Through our windows, I could see guests arriving at the Sterling Rose for Brandon's private opening party, and I had to admit the scene looked impressive. Valets were parking luxury cars, photographers were capturing arrivals, and the soft lighting from inside the hotel made everything look like a movie set. For a moment, I felt a pang of loss for what I had helped create, and would never be credited for. Then our first preview guests arrived, and everything changed. "This is incredible," said Janet Morrison, a food writer for The Oregonian, as she watched Carlos expertly break down a whole duck while explaining the sourcing story behind each component of the dish. "I've never seen anything quite like this in Portland." Our open kitchen concept was working exactly as I had hoped. Instead of the traditional restaurant experience where diners ordered from a menu and waited to be served, Bloom felt more like attending a very sophisticated dinner party where the host happened to be a professional chef. Margaret live-streamed portions of the evening on our social media accounts, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. People were commenting in real time, asking questions about techniques and ingredients, and requesting reservations for our official opening the following week. By 8 p.m., we had already booked solid for our first month of operation. But the real vindication came when I noticed familiar faces starting to appear among the crowd gathering outside our windows. 3 of Brandon's investors, people I had met during my time developing the Sterling Rose concept, were clearly more interested in what was happening at Bloom than in attending his private party across the street. One of them, a prominent local businesswoman named Victoria Brennan, actually left Brandon's event and came into our space. "Jasmine, I had no idea you were doing this," she said, sampling our butternut squash soup with sage oil and pumpkin seed brittle. "This is extraordinary. It's everything I thought Sterling Rose was going to be, but with actual soul." Her comment was overheard by several other guests, including the photographer from Portland Monthly, and I realized that the story was writing itself. Social media posts from our preview dinner were already getting more engagement than Sterling Rose's official opening coverage, and food bloggers were calling Bloom the most exciting thing to happen to Portland dining in years. The evening's climax came when Brandon himself appeared at our front door. I watched through the kitchen as he stood on the sidewalk, clearly debating whether to come inside. His formal opening party was still in progress across the street, but the energy and excitement at Bloom was undeniable. After what felt like an eternity, he pushed open our door and walked straight to where I was plating desserts. "Jasmine," he said, his voice tight with something between anger and desperation. "We need to talk." The entire restaurant went quiet. Carlos paused in his preparation, our guests stopped their conversations, and I could feel everyone watching to see how this confrontation would unfold. I looked up from the vanilla bean panna cotta I was garnishing with fresh berries and honey tuile, meeting Brandon's eyes for the first time since he had fired me. "I'm a little busy right now," I said calmly, returning my attention to the dessert. "But if you'd like to make a reservation, we might have something available in about 6 weeks." The silence stretched for another moment before Brandon turned and walked out without another word. Through the windows, I watched him cross the street and disappear back into his own opening party. But the damage was already done. Everyone in Bloom had witnessed the exchange, and the story would be all over Portland's food scene by morning. The next morning brought a flood of media attention that exceeded even Margaret's most optimistic projections. The Portland Tribune ran a front-page story about the culinary David and Goliath, playing out on opposite sides of the same street, complete with photos from both opening events. But it was the social media response that truly shocked me. Videos from our preview dinner had been shared thousands of times, and food lovers from Seattle to San Francisco were asking when they could visit Portland to experience Bloom. More importantly, the professional response was everything I had hoped for. Carlos fielded calls from 3 different restaurants trying to poach him, which he politely declined. 2 investors reached out to Margaret about expansion opportunities. And most surprisingly, I received a call from the executive chef at one of Portland's most prestigious restaurants, asking if I would be interested in collaborating on a special event. But the real validation came when Victoria Brennan called me directly. "Jasmine, I owe you an apology," she said. "I invested in Sterling Rose because I believed in the concept you presented to Brandon and me 6 months ago. After last night, it's clear that you were the visionary behind everything that made that project special." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by her honesty. "But I'm focused on Bloom now." "That's actually why I'm calling. I'd like to discuss investing in your concept. What you've created has the potential to change how people think about dining in Portland." As I hung up the phone, I realized that my 3-month pop-up was rapidly evolving into something much bigger. We had bookings extending into January, media coverage that money couldn't buy, and most importantly, a team of people who shared my vision for what a restaurant could be when it prioritized community and authenticity over prestige and profit margins. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, Brandon's head chef, the prestigious hire who had replaced me. Thomas Hartwell was a James Beard Award winner with an impressive resume from New York and Los Angeles restaurants, and he looked uncomfortable as he stood in our doorway. "I wanted to see what all the fuss was about," he said, his tone carefully neutral. As I showed him around Bloom, explaining our concept and introducing him to our team, I watched his expression change from skepticism to genuine interest to something that looked like regret. "This is what I thought I was signing up for," he admitted as we finished the tour. "Brandon showed me your original concept and said it was his vision, but when I arrived, all the creativity and community connection had been stripped away. It's just another expensive restaurant now." His confession confirmed what I had suspected. Brandon had used my work to attract both investors and staff, then removed everything that made the concept special once he had what he needed. But Thomas's visit also gave me an idea that would become the final element of my revenge strategy. "Would you be interested in doing a guest chef collaboration?" I asked. "You could cook your food the way you actually want to, and we could show Portland what Sterling Rose could have been." The collaboration dinner, scheduled for the following month, sold out within hours of being announced. But more importantly, it sent a clear message to Brandon and everyone else in Portland's food scene. The best people wanted to work with Bloom, not against it. As I locked up that evening and looked across the street at Sterling Rose, I felt a satisfaction that went deeper than mere revenge. I had proven that authenticity and vision mattered more than money and connections, and I had built something that would outlast whatever petty satisfaction Brandon thought he had gained by firing me. 6 weeks after our opening, Brandon Whitmore stood in my restaurant for the second time, but this time he wasn't the confident, dismissive man who had fired me. His shoulders were slumped, his expensive suit looked rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and mounting pressure. The Sterling Rose, despite its lavish opening and prestigious pedigree, was struggling to fill even half its tables on weeknights, while Bloom had a 2-month waiting list and had been featured in 3 national food magazines. "Jasmine, please," he said, his voice stripped of its former arrogance. "I made a mistake, a huge mistake. I want to make this right." I continued plating the evening's special, pan-seared halibut with parsnip puree and crispy Brussels sprout leaves, while he spoke. Carlos and our other team members pretended to focus on their own tasks, but I could tell they were listening to every word. This was the moment we had all been waiting for, though none of us had expected Brandon to look quite so defeated. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, not looking up from my work. "A partnership. You could run both restaurants, maintain the Bloom concept here, and redesign Sterling Rose the way you originally envisioned it. Your name would be on both doors. Full creative control, 50% ownership of the restaurant operations." The offer was generous, more than generous. It was everything I had wanted 8 months ago when I first signed on to create his restaurant. But as I looked around Bloom, taking in the warm laughter of our guests, the easy camaraderie of our staff, and the genuine excitement that filled the space every evening, I realized that what I had built was worth more than any partnership Brandon could offer. "I appreciate the offer," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "But I'm not interested." His face crumpled with an expression that mixed surprise, desperation, and defeat. "Then what do you want? Name your price. I'll sell you the restaurant operation outright if that's what it takes." I smiled, feeling a satisfaction that was both sweet and complete. "There's nothing you have that I want, Brandon. You taught me that the real value was never in the building or the investment capital. It was in the vision and the people who believe in it, and those belong to me now." 3 months later, the announcement appeared in Portland Business Journal. The Sterling Rose Hotel was closing its restaurant permanently, unable to compete with the innovative dining concepts that had transformed the neighborhood. Brandon had quietly sold the hotel to a national chain that planned to convert the restaurant space into additional guest suites and a grab-and-go market. I read the news while sitting in what had once been Patricia's empty storefront and was now the permanent home of Bloom Restaurant. We had signed a 5-year lease, expanded into the adjacent space, and built a kitchen that could accommodate the cooking classes and special events that had become as popular as our regular dinner service. The success had attracted attention from food industry leaders across the country, and I had turned down 3 offers to franchise the concept in other cities, preferring to focus on perfecting what we had created in Portland. The irony wasn't lost on me that Brandon's attempt to steal my vision had ultimately forced me to create something far better than what I had originally planned. Bloom wasn't just a restaurant. It had become a model for how food businesses could prioritize community engagement, sustainability, and authentic hospitality over profit margins and prestige. We had been featured in Food and Wine magazine as one of the 10 restaurants changing American dining, and the article specifically mentioned our commitment to supporting local farmers and providing accessible fine dining experiences. But the real measure of our success wasn't in the accolades or the waiting lists. It was in the fact that our team had grown from 5 people to 15, all of whom shared ownership stakes in the business. Carlos had become my partner and co-executive chef. Margaret had expanded her marketing agency, based on Bloom's success, and even Thomas Hartwell had left his position at another restaurant to join our team full-time. Brandon's mediocre ideas had built something extraordinary, and everyone in Portland's food scene knew exactly who deserved the credit. As I stood in my kitchen, preparing for another sold-out evening, I reflected on how profoundly my life had changed since that devastating day when Brandon fired me. The path from humiliation to triumph had taught me that the best revenge isn't just success. It's building something so authentic and valuable that it makes your former adversary's vision look hollow by comparison. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is the push that forces you to discover what you're truly capable of creating on your own. The revenge had been sweet, but the future I was building would be even sweeter.